Many PMs who get stuck in certain roles from PM to VP, kind of give them perspective and some ideas to move along that career progression.
Start low. I think for most people then, if they're trying to replicate our success, you don't necessarily need a PM internship, I think is the takeaway, right? Because PM internships are pretty hard, far and few between. You became full-time. What next? How did you make the jump from PM to SPM?
Once you're a product manager and you own a certain aspect, whether that be like a whole product or it's a feature or a problem, you need to like dive in and completely be the expert on that thing.
It's just like some of the basics I have to teach them are be one of the first to show up and be one of the last to leave, you know, on days we're in the office. We're in the office 3 days a week, like those types of things.
I'm not the most technical. I have some brilliant technical-minded product managers on the team who help balance me.
I feel like there's no college degree for PM, and so we never get taught how to work with these people.
So I actually have I don't know if you can see this or not, but I have a little printout. We do this like career matrix almost.
Really quickly, I think a crazy stat is that more than 50% of you listening are not subscribed. If you can subscribe on YouTube, follow on Apple or Spotify podcasts, my commitment to you is that we'll continue to make this content better and better. And now on to today's episode. For today's episode, we have two VPs of product, and we're going to talk about how you can become a VP of product. So can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Brad Schaefer, VP of product at Abrigo, and excited to be here today with you.
If people don't know, what is Abrigo?
Yeah, it's a funny word. That's the first thing is no. So we are a company who we help credit unions and banks in the U.S. We help them grow and manage risk. So anything from getting more loans, right, originated at the institution for them to help service their communities and their borrowers, to making sure that those loans aren't risky on the backside and helping manage and track all of that.
All right. And how big is Abrigo?
So when I started, we were just getting our first bank and credit union clients, and we're up to over 2,400 institutions in the U.S. now, which is actually a majority kind of share.
Awesome. Do you guys share like revenue or valuation or anything like that?
No, since we're privately held, but there, when you can see when we were have acquired, or you know, we had an additional investment a few years ago. You can see those in the unicorn status.
Unicorn. Yep. Cool. So unicorn sized company.
Yep.
Mine was similar journey. So I started product management in 2008, became a VP of product at Apollo.io in 2020. I want to start at the beginning of both of our journeys though. Not 2020, sorry, 2024. So want to start at the beginning of both of our journeys. Where did your PM journey begin?
Yeah, well, it began just probably like you are aware, where the PM was sort of a new concept, right? I mean, some companies had it, but a lot of people are just trying to figure it out. And I actually started not in a product titled role at all, but just as a intern at Abrigo, which used to be called SageWorks, but now Abrigo. So an intern while I was finishing up college.
All right. So you started as an intern. How'd you get that internship?
Through the college job board. It was actually a marketing internship. That was my degree in school, but it was basically a startup, you know, type of fintech, and just seemed like a good thing to get some experience in.
So similar to me, actually, except I didn't start as an internship per se. I started as a part-time job. So I did a consulting club at college. Like everybody, I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll go work for McKinsey or Bain or BCG. So I'm part of the consulting club. Consulted with this software company. Because I could code, they were like, oh, we would love to have you as like a paid part-time coder. So I actually started as a coder for them. And when I was working for them part-time in college, they were like, what you're really adding value with is product. Will you come join us full-time for product? So that's how I got the full-time role. How was your transition into full-time?
Yeah, copy paste a little bit. So it was, they're doing marketing internship. Pretty much that meant anything and everything that, you know, the president or CEO or the kind of marketing lead needed. I just run around doing all sorts of stuff. And the tech team was like a few people at that point, right? And they're also wearing multiple hats. So we had these massive releases kind of back in the old school days of like the weekends, you know, it's all shut down for a few days and you're just manually testing everything, and like, hey, we need more bodies on this. So they had an intern. We're like, hey, why don't you jump in and help? So I jumped in, started testing, and then that was just kind of like a foot in the door of like, all right, seems I have a mind for this and an aptitude to this. And then just as we grew, we just needed more people to help in the product area. And I just kind of inserted with doing some internship stuff around, whether it be customer discovery, or writing up a spec here or there, or bug testing, just kind of anything that they needed. So
I think those are the perfect 3 areas, actually. If there's a lesson for somebody, like try to do some customer discovery, talk to customers, document what you learned,
yeah,
talk to them about the product itself, right? What problems they're facing in the product, where they're getting frustrated, what roadblocks. I think if you just bring that type of information, even as an intern, they start to say, oh gosh, this guy, he has a product mind and he could be someone who could add to our product team.
yep, exactly. And then they basically offer me a full-time position to be quote unquote on the product tech team. So
Yeah, and I remember I had a pretty measly salary. I think it was something like $60,000. So it wasn't very much, but then you get the title.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty similar.
So start low. I think for most people, then, if they're trying to replicate our success, you don't necessarily need a PM internship, I think is the takeaway, right? Because PM internships are pretty hard, far and few between. But get an internship and then do some work with the product team or the people who are building product and show your value there.
Yeah, so I actually have a lot of success. We have multiple product managers on our team today. Some of the best ones came from other parts of the company. So they took an entry-level role in support or in integration or implementation, and we knew that they had interest in product for some of them. Some of them they found out after they joined. But I think that's a really neat path to follow where they've kind of selected like, hey, I want to be in technology. This fintech, they picked the company with that goal and aspiration of growing into the role rather than maybe settling for something that was product tangential, but not at a company that maybe does product or they couldn't learn from.
Yeah, and is there an element maybe then of company selection too? But because I guess both of our stories happened in smaller teams. I guess this is probably more, this strategy probably works better at smaller companies.
Yeah, I would imagine so as well.
Yeah, I think at larger companies, it's probably more like rigid, like how you actually break into PM. So, okay, if you want to break into PM in college, get an internship at a small software company, ideally one probably that has like a good trajectory that's likely to grow. And then add a lot of value, as like you said, discovery. What were the other 2? Bug testing and writing specs.
Yep.
Okay. So I think those are the 3 areas to add value. So you became full-time. What next? How did you make the jump from PM to SPM?
Yeah. Well, again, yeah, the titles and the exact roles were fuzzy then, right? But it was basically there's 2. I think they sound contradictory, but they're not. If you kind of let me, get to the explanation, but it's once you're a product manager and you own a certain aspect, whether that be like a whole product or it's a feature or a problem, you need to like dive in and completely be the expert on that thing, right? So like I feel like that was like for me it was kind of my biggest like aha moment to show what I was capable of, but also just like adding that value to a company where you really dive all the way in on, okay, let me understand this industry, let me understand this product, how does the technology behind it work, like how I interact with the devs. So it's just like really going deep on, and the foundational layer is you completely owning that task that is in front of you or that you're given or that you're assigned, right? Because if you don't do that well, it's really hard to kind of like grow from there or to have a good perspective at that same company. So I think that for me and for others that I really look for in a product manager is like, okay, they have like, yeah, they're failing a bunch and they're trying to figure it out and they're asking a lot of questions, but like, I know they have that thing covered, right? Because they have that owner's mentality around it. So I think that was a big one. And then the potentially contradictory sounding one is once you have that base and you feel very confident in that, make sure you are like exploring a bunch of different other things while you can. So like I'd say the first one first because I think sometimes people might be like, okay, I need to jump in and I need to be everywhere. I need to try these 20 different things. I need to get exposure in these different areas, which is great. But if you do that better than you do like owning your specific task, then you kind of looked at it reverse in my mind. So once you got the foundation, then like volunteer for stuff that you have no idea how to solve. There's not a lot of these problems that we're given, right? That's why they need us, is because like there's not an obvious solution. There's not a step-by-step guide. And I know a lot of product managers can be kind of hesitant to like jump in on those. And I'm suggesting like once you got your foundation, jump into it, try stuff out, experiment, volunteer, raise your hand for things that like you have no idea about. And you'll learn a ton in that process. You'll meet new people and kind of like grow your influence and then build all those skills that, we need as a product manager to show that senior level type of thinking of like, okay, they can take a new problem and go solve that.
When I reflect back on my jump from PM to SPM, I feel like the most important thing for me was literally learning professional skills. So like you are going to have to work 9 to 10 hours a day on just one thing. There's not 4 classes that are just 2 hours a day and then you have 6 hours of homework. You're in meetings 9 hours a day. You're context switching all day. Just even making sure to send out meeting notes, takeaways. I feel the power of the pen as a PM is very important in those meetings early on, like your early meetings when you're just out of college with design and engineering. If you can just add that simple value of this is what we talked about, these are the next steps, these are who own it, just getting into those rhythms and then thinking about, okay, a 360 review cycle is going to be coming up in 6 months. 3 months before that cycle, who are the people who might be saying negative things about me? How do I flip them before that? I feel like a lot of those career skills are the most important things. They may not even be specific to PM, but I mentored a lot of early career PMs that they don't even get those basics. Like I feel like a lot of times the early career PMs I saw now, they grew up in that COVID era where they're like used to like calling into class from their bed and stuff like that. It's just like some of the basics I have to teach them are be one of the first to show up and be one of the last to leave, you know, on days we're in the office. We're in the office 3 days a week, like, and those types of things.
Yeah, be present and, not try to hide kind of in the background. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, just make sure people know you exist. You're one of the younger, less paid people, so they're not inherently just going to focus on you. You have to sort of let them know you're there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yep.
And a lot of PMs that I see struggle, actually, I see like quite a few when they're not from the software engineering background, not being willing to also learn the technical concepts, right? So it's also, I think, important in that early PM stage to be willing to sit down with your engineer, ask your engineer, can I shadow you for a day or maybe even just 3 hours and get to see like the pains they feel in developer experience, work with your engineer, understand how they're using Figma. I feel like there's no college degree for PM, and so we never get taught how to work with these people.
Yeah, I think it's that curiosity mindset and that ownership mentality of I want to know how all this works because at the end of the day, it's my product or my feature, right? So I want to make sure that I understand how all the parts connect. And, I'm always amazed, I guess, by, PMs. And obviously, as you kind of get higher level and a little more strategic, it may change. But kind of in the weeds product management, how they can be disconnected from aspects of their product, whether that be like how is support handled for that product, how is this product being sold, like it's like learning that's in that PM kind of the senior PM range, right, where you're learning like how does this actually work across the entire ecosystem and life of this product, not just I got feedback, I wrote a spec, I put it into Jira and I'm kind of done, right, wipe my hands of it. So I think it's a great point because I remember sitting there and my team will be the first to tell you if anyone's listening, like I'm not the most technical. I have some brilliant technical minded product managers on the team who help balance me. But like I sit there with a dev watching them code or debug something just so I could understand it. And we could like back and forth just riff on, hey, like, great, I give you an idea or a spec or a PRD, but like, let's actually just talk about it and like look at it. And I had to learn enough to be able to speak intelligently so I wasn't, frustrating them the entire time that experience. So.
Yeah, and I think that everybody's talking about AI right now. I think one of the things AI does is it elevates the bar for how PMs need to add value when they're actually meeting with people. And so the more you can learn those design and development skills, I feel like in this era, it's even more important maybe than when we became PMs.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and we didn't have the AI note takers back in the day either. So
so even that was a little value add, right? So when you personally are thinking about, okay, I have these 3 PMs who I could potentially promote to SPM. Maybe I'm only going to promote one. What are typically the factors you're looking at that like this PM has proved they're ready for that next level?
Great question. So I actually have I don't know if you can see this or not, but I have a little printout. We do this like career matrix almost. So what it does is it basically lists like each product role we have at the company, and then we have skills, and then we have where that person is plotted on kind of that skill matrix. So it's not a hard and fast, like, okay, whoever's, a little bit further in those might be the senior candidate, but we try to do that to be fair and to have objective, right? Like, how am I doing type conversations? Because I think before, for many years until we had something like this, it was very subjective. It was like, oh, this person maybe like presented the best in a meeting, right? So like they might get a leg up.
Yeah.
But they don't see the 90% of like underneath the surface of what's going on, with them on the dev team and how they're actually building products and taking care of customers. So we basically say, hey, what are the top 10 kind of like skills or influence areas that, we as product managers at Abrigo need to have? And then where, how we basically have everyone kind of like self-rate themselves as we do these assessments. And then the manager, does a rating as well. And the big thing that creates is that conversation, right? So it's that back and forth of, oh, hey, like, let's make sure we get you more exposure in this area because you are kind of like a little lower in the skill gap here, but it's on us and on you to like get those experiences for you. So our long-winded answer to get to sort of that's usually where, that's the baseline we'll go to is where are people kind of on that matrix. But in, all that aside, like skills are helpful and that helps like kind of break some ties, but it's all about like, character is like number one, right? It's like, okay, is this person, back to the business skills you talked about, and just like those soft skills, you can have someone who like is great at some of the product management hard skills who, if you put into a senior or a higher role, they're just going to go like cause unnecessary chaos, maybe with other teams or other departments, or they're going to just kind of be off the wall a little bit, right? So, or it's like maybe they're not able to talk to customers well. And like that senior role is going to be a lot more about talking to prospects and customers and not only solving their problems, but also it might be a little bit of like, selling to them at times, right? It's just like you have to kind of know and have those that perspective of when do I kind of take on this role as a product manager or this role. So I think there's a lot of that awareness and character and personality kind of goes into it as well. And then obviously, like the matrix of hard skills that they've acquired over the years too.
Hey, let me take a quick break to talk about something that's completely changed my product management workflow, Linear. As a PM, I was drowning in tools, one for planning, another for issue tracking, roadmaps and sheets, and jumping between Slack, Intercom, and app reviews just to piece together customer feedback. Sound familiar? I was spending more time keeping systems in sync than actually building product. Every time development kicked off, my carefully crafted plans would immediately need updating. I was the human API between all our teams, constantly chasing updates and translating between tools. That's why I love Linear. I can capture customer feedback, shape product ideas collaboratively, quarterback cross-functional teams, and monitor development progress in one place. It cuts through the maze of disconnected systems that were complicating my life. Product teams at OpenAI, Vercel, Brex, and Cash App all use Linear. If you're tired of spending your days keeping different tools and teams in sync, check out Linear at linear.app/partners/AAKASH. That's linear.app/partners/Aakash. Today's episode is brought to you by Amplitude. Building great digital products is hard. You know that better than anyone. Getting teams aligned, measuring what matters, and scaling your product strategy isn't easy. But what if you had a clear framework to guide your next steps? That's exactly what Amplitude built. They studied the best product teams to understand what really drives impact, and turned those insights into the Digital Experience Maturity Assessment. In 2 minutes, you'll be able to see where your team stands and what you can improve to build better products faster. Click the link in the caption to take the free assessment and get a clear path to product growth. Yeah, a lot of it I think about in terms of at least what's standard across PM roles is that your most junior level, this level we're just about tying the bow on, you're typically doing feature level success, right? And so what I want to see out of you is that you're doing an awesome job with those features. You're not just, for instance, taking the feature as it was described to you. You're doing discovery on the problem. You're redefining potentially the problem a little bit after you learn it better. You're actually doing solution discovery where you look at multiple either designs or prototypes, or at least you sketch out different options. You might even put those in front of customers in terms of like an alpha or a beta group before you roll it out to everybody. And then there's also some measurable impact, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's one thing that I saw with some PMs who might have been stuck at the level, for instance, is, yeah, okay, the features that they're working on, they shipped, but we're not really sure what impact, like, was there an ROI overall? And I think now more than ever, PMs need to think about what is the total cost that we spent on this feature? If there were 3 engineers who spent half a quarter plus me half a quarter, that's basically half. That's like 2 headcount for half a quarter. So then what's the cost for a headcount half a quarter? Maybe that's, $100,000 roughly. So do we get $100,000 back from the company? I think it's very important to also think about that when you're working on features.
Yep, I agree.
So do you have ROI? Do you have results? So if you're a PM at this stage, I think execute on your task like you said, execute on your career skills like I said, and then make sure you have that measurable impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that measure can change based on the situation is what I've found, right? I mean, obviously there's some guiding North Stars that we all try to like point towards, but it's helping identify and then communicate those measures as well, not just in a kind of in a vacuum coming up with what, you as the product manager thinks is important for that, but is that something that there's buy-in from the company or the team on, and how are you actually tracking that and then communicating those results as well? Because you can achieve some random result that is measurable to you but doesn't really still do you any good. So it's like, is it the right thing that you're measuring for that situation, for that product, at the company?
Yep. So now you're a senior PM. Let's talk about moving from senior PM to that next level, which I believe for you is like a manager of PMs.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So for me, I guess it was actually kind of similar. So what I ended up doing is I ended up going work on my own startup, and then I returned from that startup as a growth manager. So basically similar, like senior PM to manager of PMs or manager of growth and products. So how did you make that jump up?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that is shifting a little bit from, so you need to be good at your job and good at a product manager job, obviously, check, right? But I think a lot of that jump is showing what you can do on the people side, right? And on the more strategic side and working across teams. So a few things I think that come to mind are, as a senior PM, right, I was still doing a lot of like jumping into interviewing new product managers and kind of raising my hand for training them, mentoring them. So like getting that experience and building that muscle, and then also letting people see like, oh, this person's kind of a go-to for newer PMs, or even, hey, we need a better relationship with the sales team, for example, right? Which I'm sure is never a problem for any product and team. But right, like, so okay, let me be the one that kind of like goes and maybe builds those bridges and makes some connections and relationships on the team, and then brings them together, right? So yeah, I think it's just a lot of shifting from kind of, it's almost a given if you're good at the product role itself, to how can you help train and influence other product individuals, other team members. And then the kind of third part of that is like, what or how are you shifting to some more strategic thinking? So is that, hey, working on maybe a roadmap, across the entire product line, not just what you're in charge of, but hey manager, let me like take a first crack at that, right? So taking on some of those jobs. Someone taught me this, I kind of stolen it from them, but like, ask your manager or your director or your VP, like, what can I take off your plate? Like, one, it's awesome to get asked that, right? As an executive. So it's like, the person's like, oh, this person cares and they want to jump in. But also you get a ton of potentially interesting experiences that you wouldn't have otherwise. Worst case, you did something different for a little while and it was interesting, but best case, you get that exposure to the other individuals, you do a good job, and they see what you're capable of there.
Yeah, so I think Ethan Evans calls this the magic loop. It's get really good at what you're assigned, and then be so good at that you ask your manager, hey, what else can I help with?
Yep.
Or even maybe an advanced version of that is, I see you have this problem here. I'm thinking I'm going to go solve that. Do you have any feedback on my approach for how I'm going to go solve this problem for you? And I really like the idea of a roadmap at their level, because when you're trying to make this jump from senior IC into manager, a lot of it is being able to give direction to other PMs. And so you have to be able to then help them with feedback on their roadmaps, on the problems they should be solving, on the metrics they should be going after. And so showing that you think at that level, I think, is very important. And this is probably one of those levels, senior IC, where I think some people get stuck for a really long time in their career. So I don't know if you've seen any examples of those. How did those people get unstuck?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I think it takes a little bit of intentional decision from those individuals on what do they want with their career. So I've had several people where we just have to kind of work through, hey, do you want to stay kind of an IC level, then go more towards a principal and just be the best of the best and go be able to crush and solve any problem that's given you, right? And like have that sort of career path, which is a totally, to my mind, acceptable and, awesome option. or do they want to manage and lead people and teams? So I think that's like step one is you as an individual need to figure that out, whether it's like kind of internally or with your manager. And then, from there you kind of figure out, okay, how do we get unstuck? And if it's kind of, we're talking more toward the manager path, I think a lot of it is honestly just like creating that exposure and those opportunities. So another thing, I mean, there's nothing really super original, right? Like something else I stole from my manager. So thanks to him, but he would have us do this exercise, and I still have my team do it and them with their teams of basically, hey, let's write down every like name of person at the company that you want to have a better relationship or grow an influence with. And then we're going to write like a specific thing that we're going to do next. Like, so write their name, write down what you want them to think about you or how you want them to be perceived. And then what can we do as one step towards that? But it's not, so you're like manufacturing things, but they're valuable things. Like it's not, don't make up fluff. Don't, have a thing just to have a thing, right? Like don't make up an interaction, but is it, we want to get better feedback from the implementation team. So, okay, who should we talk to about that? And how do we make that first step? And it just kind of gets you a little bit out of the comfort zone and gets you then talking with like, oh, wow, like, okay, I just talked to the CEO. I talked to these 3 leaders. I talked to these 4 people that maybe I would only have interacted with once a year, but now I just hit them all in like a month and, have gotten a bunch of exposure and experience there. And then their view kind of back on that individual helps elevate them to the next role as well.
Yeah, I think that the senior exposure is very, very important at this point, because if you're going to make the jump from IC to manager, there's going to be a lot more people kind of chiming in on that decision of whether you're ready to be a leader at the company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's more voices on that.
So when you look at people who you've recently promoted from IC to manager, what were the things like that you stood on for their promotion case, or you looked at like, okay, when you were telling other people, yes, I think they should be?
A few things. So number one is basically pointing to successes they had in the product itself. So like initiatives that they rolled out or that they led. So a lot of times, because, especially maybe a smaller company, maybe it's a bigger company too, but even if you own a certain product, you're probably going to be like helping coordinate larger efforts that maybe they don't think, okay, that person owns XYZ product or initiative, but you're, got your hands in a bunch of different things. So I think making sure that there's awareness, like you as a director or manager, if you're trying to help promote somebody, creating the awareness and giving the credit to those individuals where it's due, right? And not like kind of deflecting that off yourself. I mean, it's easier said than done, right, as humans, but I think that is really important. And like making sure that other individuals at the company are aware, and it's whether it's directly like talking to them and telling them that, but it's usually more in like subtle ways, right? It's like maybe a meeting or an email or some sort of like success thing of, hey, look at this customer said, like, and then you copy some executives on it, and you also have the individual who sort of like led that, and you say, thanks to Joe for leading this initiative or whatever it might be, right? Just like little ways like that.
Yeah.
And you just start elevating their name. And again, it's all true, honest things, but you get them, people start thinking like, oh yeah, Joe's going to be a manager. Like, of course, I saw he's been doing great recently. So
I love that. So you need to create, I almost think of it of how like with companies that if people have worked with their founders before an investment round, you want to create these moments where the investor saw you in the news or something. It's almost like you want your executive team to see the PM in the news for something. They launched this initiative. It was successful. They were the driver. And so I guess if you're the SPM in that situation, if you do have a milestone that you feel like is great enough to be broadcast to the executive team, maybe even proactively ask your manager, like, is this something we should send out to the executive team as an update?
Yeah, I think that's a totally a fair ask. Yeah.
So proactively managing it. For me, I noticed that some of the people who got stuck at this stage, my peers, like the other directors of product, when I was trying to promote this person into manager, they were kind of questioning like how much of a leader that person was. Like they would say like, oh, but are they really going to be a leader at this company? Have you ever run into that? And how can people show that they're a leader?
This episode is brought to you by Attio, the next generation CRM. Imagine a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and actually intuitive. Attio makes that a reality. As I've profiled in the Product Growth newsletter, setting up Attio takes less than a minute, and within seconds of syncing your email and calendar, you'll see your relationships in one place, enriched with valuable data, including things like relationship strength. Attio lets you build Zapier-style automations, create powerful reports, and works for any go-to-market motion, from PLG to sales-led. Attio is designed for the next era of companies like yours. And companies like yours shouldn't have to deal with inflexible, one-size-fits-all CRMs. Join industry leaders like 11 Labs, Replicate, and Modal. Head to attio.com/productgrowth and you'll get 15% off your first year. That's attio.com/productgrowth.
Yeah, probably a little different phrasing for us, but I think that concept is definitely something I have seen. For us, everyone's situation is different, but I think for us, when we hear that, it's basically showing that person cares, right? So like, there's a level of like give a crap, if you will, right? Like, and I wouldn't be pushing for someone to be promoted if I didn't already see that in them, because I mean, that's one of those when we talked about what are the characteristics to look for. I mean, that is from a characteristic personality. Like, I need to know that person cares. Not that they've dedicated their life to this and sake of everything else, but when they're, here and focused, like they care about the customer, they care about the product, they care about their team. They are here to make a difference, right? So I think for us, that's the characteristic that we basically look at to say, can it be a leader, right, at the company, or is it someone who can be like an ambassador of the company? So it's if I already know that information, or otherwise I wouldn't be wanting them to get promoted, or into that role. It's just like, how do I again make sure that that's obvious to those other peers and other leaders, and hopefully along the way before it even gets to that point, I'm finding opportunities for maybe that senior PM to like work with those peer directors of mine, right? Where it's like, hey, like there's this problem over here. I need, can you go help them solve that? Right? Like just kind of like pivoting people. And that's, I think, a big just overall concept is like being flexible. And that I think will get you a long way on this PM, and probably any role, honestly, right? In the career advancement.
Yeah, I think that's the critical element there is like the insight for this specific jump for people is your boss's peers have a lot to say about the jump. And so try to create feature link ups, a lot of times your feature might impact their area. Maybe work with them a little bit closer, invite them to the product reviews, let them get to see you in action. And then what I've coached some of the PMs on are little things, very person specific, but like one person, I specifically was like, I think the way you are perceived in meetings isn't authoritative enough, where I think they would be very meek and they wouldn't be wanting to, like, for instance, cut off an executive who's talking a really long time and they need to redirect the meeting back. They weren't able to do that. And so I think those are some of the characteristics that we want to see in our leaders, is the ability to lead a meeting with a bunch of loud execs, or be able to also diffuse emotional situations. Sometimes there might be, someone feeling down, but it shouldn't be the case that, okay, your designer's upset with you and your designer's still upset with you 2 weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
Like 2 days later, you should go and fix that issue right away.
That's a great point. Yeah. Can they resolve the problems that aren't just product problems, right? They're team and human problems. I think I'm glad you mentioned that about the kind of diffusing situations. A big teller for us on someone being sort of like promotable ready, kind of the senior and after roles, is basically asking ourselves, like, would I, trust putting this person to lead a customer escalation? Like, think about a big upset customer, very important to the company. Would I feel comfortable being like, hey, you go and be the lead on this, run the meetings, organize people around it? And like, for me, that's a great tell of where they are in their kind of journey.
Yeah, I like that. The customer escalation test for the jump up to manager. So that's the kind of the skill set you need to develop, is being able to control those meetings, being able to proactively even think about, okay, if it's a customer escalation, I should probably be updating my exec team every 12 to 24 hours about how it's going, and proactively doing that without your manager asking, and all of those things I think are very helpful.
Yep, totally agree.
So was there anything in particular, if you look back and just remember your own promotion case, that kind of sealed the deal for you moving to manager?
I think it was honestly just it was that the obviously the doing the job, well, check again part, but I think it was a lot of the exposure and experience I was getting by putting myself or, the company putting me in those positions of I literally interviewed like hundreds of people, candidates, and I raised my hand to be like the resume screener, like hundreds and hundreds of resumes before we had good, AI screening, where it's like, okay, I can sort of like start understanding people and reading them and having that sort of discernment, right, of individuals coming in. So I think that like seeing me connected with people in that way, and then kind of helping train and onboard and make better onboarding systems, like all of that probably, was a big part too that played into it for me.
Yeah. So for me, I guess I kind of got lucky where what ended up happening is the growth areas that I ran, like the product surface areas, we were just succeeding so much that we kept adding engineers to them. And they were eventually just like, well, Aakash is leading like 15 engineers and 3 designers on his own. And we all know he's working too hard. He's the first in, he's the last out. We need to give him some relief. So I think that also helped create a lot of catalyst for like, okay, we need to promote him to manager so he can hire somebody.
Were we at the same company doing the same thing? Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to make sure at some point in this we did talk about that a little bit, where a lot of this is situational, right? Like there is luck in this, where you put yourself in the right situation, you take, and you do the best in those situations. But exactly the same, we were growing so fast, like we had to scale and have, at the beginning it was like, hey, we're not gonna have any layers, we're not gonna do any of that, and then you quickly over the years you're like, oh, we have a lot of people trying to do a lot of things, and everyone's kind of like stepping on each other a little bit. So those opportunities were naturally created, which, we may kind of get to this later about how as you grow and mature, those are more difficult and you have to actually manufacture some of those. But at the beginning, the first kind of half of my career, it was just going so fast. We're hiring so many individuals on the tech team. We needed to fill those roles. And, I was a willing and able participant in that.
Yeah, so I think you, at this very last stage of your IC journey, you probably need to think about taking on more scope than the other ICs so that it's obvious that they should put another IC under you.
Yep.
So that's kind of the formula to move to manager. So what was the next step for you after manager? Director?
Director, yep.
Yep. So same here for me. So how did you make that manager to director jump?
I think that's where it turned more to the strategic aspect, right? So leading the conversations around what do we actually want to like focus on as a company, even like those conversations, right? Not that I could just go and decide or, whatever, like talking with the executives about that and my manager, and kind of like you said before, like pulling in some of that work that I saw that was interesting to me, but also that I saw maybe a gap in, where, yeah, we had a general direction we're going in, but we didn't really have, some unified, like, hey, these are our 3 strategies, as a company, and how that then fits into product, and, sort of trickle that down. So I think it was really like noticing that gap, and then being just interested in helping fill it and say, let me help with some strategy, some mission vision sort of work. So I think that was a big part of it for my journey. Yeah, I don't know if it's similar for you or not. A lot of pieces, but I feel like that's kind of one that stands out to me.
So for my story, basically what happened is the company was growing so fast. By this time I was at this company called ThreadUp, which is now a public company. And every new leader who, whether they were like a VP or a chief product officer or chief people officer or anybody, they would always get on their list of people they had to meet me. Yeah. And I was just like, manager of product management. And so I think that because of the impact that I was having on the business, driving a lot of the fundraisers that we did, our Series C, Series D, I actually met with our investing team as well. Because my product area was having so much impact, so all the new executives were just meeting me early on. It created a lot of visibility, kind of similar to the concept we were talking about for senior ICs, where people are talking about your wins. People are talking about you behind your back. And I think that was probably the most important thing. Like, they just handed me my director promotion. I didn't ask for it. I didn't even go through a normal promotion cycle. They were just like, the amount of impact you're having, the amount we want to compensate you, you'd be way out of band for manager. So you're a director now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what this is, right? Is making yourself super valuable to a company where it's like they can think about, hey, who can we not afford to lose? And if you're on that list of names that, come up in those conversations, and yeah, I think you see the results kind of what you did.
Because when we're managers of PMs, we have a ton of leverage at this point, right? Like we're determining the roadmaps for so many engineers and designers. And so I think that this is the level. If you're stuck at this level, you should be looking really hard at the impact you yourself are having compared to the other managers. Like, are your product teams having the most bottom line impact? That was kind of the reality for me. What was it like for you?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think for us, so as I think was it Jason Knight maybe, and I was listening to some of his podcasts with you, and I was just like nodding like up and down on everything he's saying. But like it kind of come back to the the B2B world. I mean, it's different. It's a different beast, right? Obviously, there's a lot of same concepts, but for us, that's why I said the measurement would just be different for the product and for the team and for the situation. So very similar on our side, but instead of it being just like such an obvious, or I don't know if it's obvious for you, but it sounds like maybe you had like, hey, this is the growth of this product, and probably very attributable to sort of the product work you're doing there. A lot of ours was like, hey, we're gonna during that early stages, it was like we're gonna just try a bunch of stuff, see kind of like what sticks around, and then being able to then kind of like not fight for, but basically insert yourself into where you see like the highest potential or opportunity of that product set, but also not saying no to like maybe some of the muck, right? So like that's why I'm saying like it's not like it wasn't as clear as a full, hey, this product's team and all the things you own, are they all growing and successful? Typically people who are successful, and for myself, it was you got one or two things really going great. It's like flying off the shelves. That's part of the growth story. Customers are using it, adopting it, and we have all those measurements. And then the other half was like, okay, but the other half of their stuff isn't doing great. But why is that? And it's, they're taking risks. They're trying things out. They're saying yes to the stuff no one else wanted to say yes to, right? So that's kind of what I'm getting at, is definitely make sure you have some of those successes and some of the things that are really measurable, like good. But then also I would not necessarily shy away from maybe some of the like yuck kind of stuff, in the product realm.
Yeah, I don't think it was my path, but I've seen a lot of people make the director jump where basically the company feels like they're a reliable executive who can go in and solve problems in an area that other people are having trouble solving problems. Like I remember I saw somebody at a firm get promoted to director. And basically he came into a product area where they had like laid off or like fired like 3 previous PMs, but he fixed it, like it was actually working under him. And I think being a problem solver is really valued as well.
Yeah, I'd say it's true for any of these levels of roles, right? I mean, that's a product kind of staple, I think, for us. But
yeah.
Did you find, Kirsten, your experiences, I think one of the most challenging aspects for me and for individuals who I see go either to manager or to director, kind of somewhere in that range of role, depending on like the team size, is the delegation struggle. And I mean like struggle. It's typically like the number one thing because of all the stuff we talked about as a IC, that you're hyper focused on solving the problem. It stops with you. You are the person that's going to get the escalations. You're in there like figuring it out, solving it, sitting with the engineer, right? So that's just like how we're wired, and at least how all sort of like our product managers are wired. So you do that for years and years and years, and then you get to this kind of like transition period where you're still helping out with some of the individual stuff, and you still maybe have a product or two you own, but at the same time, it's now this whole other world of like, oh, I need to figure out how to free up time to focus on the things that actually help the team more than going and like solving a point problem. Right. So that's something I got stuck in was, hey, I thought, I don't want them to think I'm just like giving them work and then I don't want to do the work anymore. But at the same time, if I'm continuing to just take on these kind of like onesie twosies or like dive into specific problems, number one, I'm not giving them the opportunities that I had to grow and to get that experience, even if it's like messy, difficult stuff. So I'm actually stunting their growth. Two, it's not giving me time to go help solve broader problems that actually come back and help them more than something I could have done on a Tuesday or a Wednesday for them. But rather, hey, how do we build those better relationships with other teams? How do we completely change the way that we roadmap and communicate to customers so that we're not held to a specific date of the year? You know, this feature is going to come out on February 13th, and then we're all scramble mode when that happens. So it's like stepping back and be able to solve those problems actually returns a lot more to your team and your company, but you kind of don't like get time for that if you're struggling with that delegation. So curious if similar.
Yeah. I think Ravi Mehta called this the product leader canyon, essentially, where people fall into like just doing their icy stuff that was getting them there. But I think while you probably still need to be kind of the best ICPM amongst your team so that you can show them what world-class BRDs and execution and all of that looks like, that's only like 20% of your work, right? And so it's kind of funny where the other 80% of your work is kind of this amorphous thing where you're responding to executive Slack messages on Saturday morning, and you're going to one-on-ones with your team, and you're going to product reviews, and you're just in so many communications all the time. How would you wrap up how to make the transition from manager to director?
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit more of the same of what we talked about in terms of the influence and exposure and making sure you're visible, but in productive, useful ways. And then making sure you find kind of, you know, that a project or two, right, that like really starts getting you company wide. So working with other teams, because like we talked about with even the manager jump, there's other voices. I mean, director and above, you know, typically at companies, you're getting, it's not maybe just questions. It might be actual like like forms you have to fill out, or like, you know, cases you have to make for why that individual should get that role. So the more kind of like champions you can have for you around that company, the better, and means you're adding value for those teams as well.
Yeah. And what I found is that the people who have successfully made the manager to director jump, it wasn't just the product leaders talking about how good that person was. There were design leaders, there were engineering leaders, there were sales leaders, customer success leaders saying, this person is doing a lot for the company.
Yep, agreed.
So it's about that broader functional impact. And then personally for me, I always had confidence that they could do really good strategy work, which you mentioned at the beginning. So I think those are kind of the two elements for that director jump.
Yep.
So let's move on to that final stage, VP jump. And before we even do that, can you walk us through like the years you took at each step for these jumps?
If memory serves correct, then yes, I can.
Okay.
So I believe the all the way from the beginning, or
Yep.
from, oh boy, it's testing the
Yeah.
memory here. So again, yeah, I mean the titles, my actual official first title was like financial analyst or something like that,
Oh.
but it was product manager,
Mhm.
right? So I did that for let's call it like 3 years, and then senior product manager probably for another 3 years. So I think that tracks about, and then some of the internal work I did before that was sort of product related. And then director and senior director were, and manager was like pretty quick to director, kind of like you, where it's just, hey, this, like, we reorged how we do titles and everything else, and it just sort of made sense as a natural jump. But let's call it like 2 years in each of those, basically. You can see it's sort of like the hey, we want to make sure this person's like happy, they're trying to get more and more responsibility and take on more things, and we were growing, so it's just sort of like the natural schedule. And then I think the longest period was that kind of between director and VP, because it just is such as a, at least for us and our company, it's a lot of factors have to align, right, I guess, to make that jump.
Yeah, when you're talking about going to VP, I think even like sometimes the board gets involved in different things. So usually you're talking about some sort of big equity grant that's coming with the jump. And so maybe the investors are getting involved. So it really is that last level jump. It's very, very important. For me personally, I think what ended up helping the VP trajectory, and I think I was a director. So I was a director 2 or 3 times before I finally made VP at different companies too. So it wasn't like a straight line. I think learning the director skill set, I guess all in all, I was like a director for like 4 or 5 years. So quite a bit of time like at the director level. And when I ultimately made the shift to VP, I think what I demonstrated for me, what was probably the most important was thought leadership within product-led growth. That was right when I was around the director level, was when I started publishing more online. People started recognizing more broadly, okay, this is somebody who really understands product-led growth. So then when I became VP, they were like, okay, it's very easy to go tell the investors and other people, like, he's not only made X and Y impacts at our company, but people across the industry really see him as this thought leader. So I think that's what helped my case. What ended up helping your case?
This feels like the first maybe major diversion in our stories, right? So, I guess I say that, but actually there is some similarities. Mine was just more internal or kind of with like customers and that sort of thing. So what I mean by that is kind of, we talked about this concept of being like the go-to or being like a name that pops up in people's minds when, hey, there's someone they need to go talk to or introduce. I was becoming the like go-to on whether it be, okay, we got our conference coming up and we need to, run a roadmap and user group session or something like that, right? It's like, okay, Brad's probably going to do that. Or just assume like he's going to jump in and, probably help manage that. So it was kind of that more internal and like customer influence. And I was, learning the market, learning the, so I think also part of, we didn't really talk about this a whole lot, but in my journey leading up to VP, I also had the awesome opportunity to like bring a lot of product concepts to the team. And now they do it way better than I even introduced it or could have. But, I helped bring the concept of agile development, right? Sort of the Scrum team concept, using Jira, using other tools like, analytics and that sort of thing. So I think that all helped like kind of build towards the like, okay, I'm someone at least who can recognize what's happening in the industry generally with product and UX. And I'm not a foremost expert by any means, but I'm, enough to like bring it to a company to make us productive and useful with it. Another example is, this is kind of a funny one, but I'm like the first unofficial UX designer that we had at the company. Before that was really a concept. I was just a product manager, realized our stuff looked bad and said, what do we need to do about this? I went to like a Nielsen Norman UX conference, just drove up there, made a case for why we need to do it, and then came back and helped evangelize and set up kind of UX systems and frameworks and heuristics, and did like a kind of a redesign of, the entire platform with at least some of those basic heuristics. So maybe not all like while I was director, but I think all of that leading up, sort of your external thought leadership, maybe I would, characterize that as some internal thought leadership. So a lot of similarities there, where it's find something that you are seen as that either expert or someone who's bringing those kind of new thoughts and that industry perspective into.
Yeah, I've seen that really commonly. Like you mentioned, if you're bringing in the tools, if you were seen as the champion of Jira, the product analytics tool, evolving the way the whole company does product, then it makes sense to make you the head of product. Yeah. And so I think it's, how do you impact beyond just whatever you're director of product of, but the broader company, how the broader company is working, how the broader product teams are working. That's, I think, when they finally feel like, okay, we can make this person a VP.
Yeah, I like that concept a lot. I think it was Marty Kagan, and it was, obviously one of all of our heroes, right? But I think when you were talking with him, and in a lot of his books, he just mentions you have more ability to impact change than you probably think you do in whatever role or level you're in. So I'm a huge proponent of that in terms of like, just don't assume you can't go change that thing. I mean, obviously there's bounds you have to work in and you have to have some of those business skills while you're doing it, but why not take a try at those if you see a problem and just go, make the company better? And that worked out for probably a lot of us. So
you made VP in roughly 11 years. Looks like I made VP in roughly 14 years. For people who want to replicate like our journey and they're still at the beginning of their careers, what would be kind of the advice you give them?
Yeah, so I'll actually play a little bit off what I just mentioned, but a little different aspect, maybe the reverse. This depends on the situation, the company you're in. You have to have some level of trust and that you believe they have the best for you. So if you're not in that situation, I don't know, maybe you should find a different situation first of all. But I had the fortunate experience of being in that situation. If that's the case, I really believe in taking on the tasks and responsibilities and the jobs regardless of your title or your salary. So I feel like in every step for me and for everyone I've seen be really successful at my company is they were doing the things of that next role before they were put into that position. So obviously, again, there's a lot of details right there that I don't want to be missed, but I've had some people very, very strict on, hey, I hear you, I see this opportunity, I'm interested in it, I want to jump into it, but I'm not going to do that unless I get that title or that raise that comes with it. And that's not worked out, I don't believe, for anyone who's given me that viewpoint. It's worked out for everyone who says, awesome, that sounds cool, let me jump in, I'm going to go like crush that, and the title and the money come with that.
Brad, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, this is a blast. Love to get to talk product and share some failures and some learnings, and just honored to be on here with you.
If people want to find you online, where can they find you?
Not many places. No, just LinkedIn is the best. Yeah, Brad Schaefer at Abrigo. Love to connect with anyone who's interested.
All right.
I really hope you guys enjoyed that episode. It would mean a ton to me and the team if you could please subscribe on YouTube, follow on Apple and Spotify podcasts, and leave a rating and review. Those ratings and reviews really help grow the show and help other people discover the show. And they help fund the production so that we can do bigger and better productions. Can't wait to share the next episode with you. Until then, see you later.